When they flip those headsets on, they're in that environment, it tricks their brain into switching gears. And so they can start taking care of patients.
These guys put on the VR headsets and the hand deals, and they were all over the place. It's like they naturally knew how to do it.
We've really found that the students have been really open to it. Even the faculty, now that I've started training some of those guys and trying to get the faculty into it a little bit more, have really started to see the value of the system.
When something happens and you're a nurse to your patient, you kind of have this push of adrenaline, and it kind of gets you all, what are you going to do? Like the code light goes off in the hospital, my heart still starts pounding. I'm like, oh my goodness. So if these students are in these scenarios and they experience that emotional response when something bad is happening to the patient in a pretend type situation, because it really is, right? Then when they actually experience at the bedside with a live body, they'll know that emotional response is going to come and be able to control it better.
We could learn to create and change those environments based on what we needed. So if I can do it, honestly, anybody can do it. I just feel like it's such an easy system to learn. The possibilities and the teaching pieces to this are endless. Running through a scenario, if we have to, using either VR or non-VR, they can watch the non-VR video recording. By the way, you can record, but you can use the recording of that particular piece. They can watch it at the bedside, and then they can switch to the chart, and then they can start taking care of the patient in the bed. It makes it more real for them as well. And that's one of the things that simulation and the VR systems have allowed us to do, is to make these events more real to students.
There was always worry of seizure, or people were going to get nauseated, or they were going to, and somehow or another, the technology has gotten past that. And people are using, like our headsets, we didn't have anybody have an issue.
This system allows us to remember we're taking care of a human too. And we have to, that's what we have to do as educators, just kind of bring that piece into it so that we don't forget the humanity and we don't get so tied up in the technology. Right. Debbie and I actually both went to graduate school together. And so we were part of a large grant that allowed us to go back to school to get our master's degrees in nursing. Part of our graduate work was to begin to write simulation scenes and events for their library, essentially. And then I guess it just kind of progressed from there. I don't have the IT background like Debbie does, but I have this huge passion for it. And I just, from my standpoint, my education, I just went forward and concentrated on simulation, and then got my certification, my first level certification for the CHSE. But I've been in the simulation world since 2008 and just progressed from there. It's been fun. I've enjoyed it. Now we're at the big sim lab, and we're fixing to introduce this amazing VR system. Most of our sims are nurse-based because of the education area that we're in. So we concentrate on those nursing processes and the learning outcomes for our students. But it has progressed. We want to do more interprofessional events. And we do some of that already with Texas Tech. Off and on, and they have scheduled events too, but this particular system is something that is brand new for us, and the technology is still so new that it's still being researched and still being trying to find its place in nursing education. So we're hoping to help that process, see how this works for us.
Excellent. You already are. It's been great already, collaborating and getting feedback from you in terms of implementing and learning. I'm curious, what brought you to virtual simulation to begin with?
Actually, it was the dreaded COVID pandemic is what it was. We were not able to go into the hospitals for a while. And so we had to figure out a system that we could run virtually and in a distance format, but that we would still be able to immerse the students into it. And so that's where the VR system kind of started. And then we found, I did an application for a grant, and Debbie's been helping me with this part of it as well a lot. She's been my right hand person. But we got the grant awarded to us, and we're able to put in a much larger system than we originally thought. And so it kind of went from there. We can use it in person. We used it just in a distance learning environment. So, but yeah, it was COVID. It was all COVID. Nobody wants to hear that. Now we've got it set up to where that we can run the sims either from the simulation center or from faculty offices. We've got that process finally going.
Now that you're in virtual simulation, what are some of your sort of immediate objectives in terms of implementing, and what programs and what types of students are using it?
My background's a little different. Kerrie's background is in sim with the mannequins and those kind of things. She's an expert in that area. I started down the path with tech and education for nursing in 2010. I was a National League of Nursing's Health Information Technology Scholar, and I had a grant for a year. And our mission was to bring technology into nursing education, because that's the way it's going. Second Life was important, and we did the Osgrid. We had some home health assessments and a disaster sim in the Osgrid, which was like going to play a video game like WoW, only not as fancy as that. So, but this was another opportunity to get in there and use technology in education, which is what we need to do. We need to move forward with it and put them in this scenario, which is really better than Second Life or the Osgrid or any of that kind of stuff, because they actually get in there. So then we came in and we did the disaster scenario in our nursing resource center with standardized patients, which was a lot of fun. Well, I can't say that it wasn't great having blood all over me and all that kind of stuff and walking around. But we took the scenario, and because it took a long time, and the standardized patients and spending a whole day, because you can only do a few students at a time, is very time consuming for faculty. And our faculty were actually volunteering to come up and have blood and guts all over them. And now they come in and we rotate them through in small groups. So they're still coming through in small groups, but it only took 3-4 faculty members to get it done, instead of 11 of them on the ground with blood everywhere, plus the people to run through with them in their groups. We had 2 rooms set up with VR stations, 2 large rooms set up. And the first thing they did was go over to the common station and put on the headset and just pick where they wanted to go and walk around. And so we had one person watching them to make sure that they didn't, fall over, or like I was doing, spinning around in a circle, grabbing stuff. Kerrie thought I was going to hurt myself. Yeah. And then after that, they'd swap and they tried it. And then after that, they went to the next room. They walked over to the next room and they put on the headsets and they went into the scenario. And I gotta say, I was kind of worried about the technology, because when we did this with the Osgrid with small numbers, people couldn't really even walk in that 3D world. They had no clue how to walk. I mean, shoot. That was it. But these guys put on the VR headsets and the hand deals, and they were all over the place. It's like they naturally knew how to do it.
The cool part too is, Debbie was talking about the scenarios. I could sit where I'm at, which is in a completely separate room, and run this whole thing. And they're in 2 other rooms. So it really worked out well.
So faculty wise, Kerrie was in her office, and she wasn't even in the headset. She was just in this view right here. And we had one faculty member in the room where they got the feel for it, walking around in the commons area. And then we had another faculty member, or me, actually in the room where they put on the headset. And then I would put on the headset. I'll be able to wear the headset longer this time because we'll have more help. But so we have a faculty member in the scenario too. So it's actually was a fun learning experience, and they got to triage. They did a good job on triage, and they loved it. And here, I forgot to tell you, Kerrie, this semester, they've already heard about it, and they're looking forward to doing it too.
Secrets.
I don't know. I don't think they heard about the explosion.
No, we may or may not do that, but
Oh, yes, we
but
will. Oh,
John,
yes,
John, you had asked about objectives and those kinds of things. And I think going through this scenario, a couple of those objectives kind of come out. One is to make sure that our students get the best possible clinical experience they can without putting them into an actual mass casualty event. So there's a way to do this safely. And that's the other objective, is helping them practice these scenarios and this patient care types in a safe environment. So that, of course, that's always our number one objective, right, in nursing. But the other ones are giving them extra tools to learn with and giving our faculty extra tools to teach with. Having a scenario and being able to immerse a student into an actual patient situation is much more effective than just throwing them into, let's say, well, we were using virtual case studies and those kinds of things, but it wasn't the same process. You don't have that immersion there. And so when they flip those headsets on, they're in that environment, it tricks their brain into switching gears. And so they can start taking care of patients, even though they seem to be in more of a game type environment. So I don't know, we've really found that the students have been real open to it. Even the faculty, now that I've started training some of those guys and trying to get the faculty into it a little bit more, have really started to see the value of the system and the fact that you don't have to come in and set up a bunch of equipment. You don't have to worry about volunteers. You don't have to worry about, if this scene doesn't work, we don't have to tear the whole thing down. You click a button, you reload, and you can shift gears. And you're not losing time, and you're not losing the value of the learning experience.
when something happens and you're a nurse to your patient, you kind of have this push of adrenaline, and it kind of gets you all, what are you going to do? Like the code light goes off in the hospital, my heart still starts pounding. I'm like, oh my goodness. So if these students are in these scenarios and they experience that emotional response when something bad is happening to the patient in a pretend type situation, because it really is, right? Then when they actually experience at the bedside with a live body, they'll know that emotional response is going to come and be able to control it better.
Yeah,
that's one of the biggest benefits I can think of in simulation, because I don't even know how to describe the emotional response and the adrenaline that goes with those patient situations where your patient's doing bad and you have to hurry up to save them. Yeah.
that was my spot that I did an ICU. So it's an addiction. Truly, it's an addiction.
So when we first set up a demo, like earlier in 2021, it was a long time ago, we started talking about this. We had kind of a very basic proof of concept of the multiple casualty scene. Madison College and Bill Ballo had kind of put together one of the patients that we have off on the left, one of the severely injured patients, and they had kind of we put that together as kind of a proof of concept, like here's an idea of what could possibly be. And I remember when we had the demo, you both immediately were like, this is cool. We would really love to like help you develop this and build more content. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience, because like this content wasn't here when you first subscribed to Acadicus. This, some of it was here. The environment was developed for LJB to be used in fall safety training, and like Madison College has been staging things in here, but none of these patients except for the one were here. So can you talk a little bit about the process of designing and creating that content and how you were able to work with our team to create exactly what you're looking for in the simulation?
So, and you guys did a great job. I had a scenario, like I had said before, in that interactive PowerPoint, where there was a multi-car crash, and there were victims that the student would click on the victim and it'd come up in a different PowerPoint page, and then, there'd be like the respiratory rate and what the response is and everything, and the student would tag it red, yellow, green, or black, tag the patient. So and y'all did really good. It was so simple for me. We looked at this scene and we're like, this would be perfect. I sent that PowerPoint to you guys, and you took it apart and you looked at it, and you made victims that would triage in the same type codes that were in that mass casualty with the car wreck and put them on the street. So for me, then I went in, and I don't remember how long I was up there. I was up there for quite a while, I guess. And I went and got a chair so I wouldn't fall over.
No, I made her go get a safety chair.
I was having a good time. So I went up in the VR world, and I moved the blood and the patients and spread them out a little bit, and I just went ahead and I did how each patient got tagged on the boards that y'all had set up, and that was it. That was all I had to do. And it's not really hard to move the assets, the bodies and the blood and everything. You just got to be in the right button and click the button and just put it where you want it to go. The only part I thought was a little tricky was making sure that it was level, like I didn't put the patient halfway down in the concrete, that kind of thing. But other than that, it was a real simple process for me. I told y'all, I gave you an example of what I wanted. It's kind of like web design. If you draw a little outline, a little map, of what you want to look, and that's all you really need to create something. And that's really what y'all did for me, and I appreciated that. And we've had fun with it, and I think it's a great learning tool too.
Debbie, she's got that background, but my background is zero IT. So everything that I've learned, I've had to learn kind of on my own and take do certifications and this and that and the other. But how I really learned to deal with this system was just to put the headset on. So as she's moving assets around in her environment, I started playing with some of the other ones so that we could learn to create and change those environments based on what we needed. So if I can do it, honestly, anybody can do it. If I can learn to click buttons, I just feel like it's such an easy system to learn once you've kind of figured out where everything was. And
I've you can't break it, you push a button,
you just delete it.
I never had to call you guys and say I lost anything, but
could you talk a little bit about how these panels work in terms of the triage exercise? If I open one of these up here.
Open. Yes. So the students, they walked around to their patients, so the victims, and they clicked it, and then tab through like check respiration, and you can edit these numbers in here with the heart, what their heart rate is, what their cap refill is, all that. I edited that. I had to put the headset on to edit it, but I went in and edited the boards for the patients. So once they go through and do it, then they go through and they pick which one it is. I wasn't reading, but like pick immediate. I think that might be it. Wasn't paying too much attention.
That's it.
Oh.
Yeah. So then if they triaged it right, then boom. Now if they triaged it wrong, like it would pick deceased delayed. There you go. And they get the red X. It was kind of cool because they were actually talking to each other, standing at the boards. Like a couple of them would stand at the boards together and talk about what it is, or there'd be like one of the students would be in one area and the other one's trying to figure out how to walk over there, and they'd be like, well, here, do this, and they'd help each other walk too. So
there's another good point to this, John, that Debbie was talking about, and it's that collaboration piece. She said that the students stand around and they look at the boards together, and you can sit behind the scenes. I can ghost myself out of the scene, still be in there. But you get a better idea of how the students are working together, which was it's actually a bonus. I really didn't think about that piece of it until I started with the students in the safety room in this room that we're fixing to go into. And then you start hearing the conversations about, but is that really a hazard? And do we really need to deal with that? And if we do, where do we put this? And so it really gets them talking to each other. So this particular scene serves two purposes. One is for the students to come in and actually recognize safety hazards within a long-term care facility room. The second purpose to this scene is to teach them how to deal with a patient that may be more difficult. So if you pull up the preset verbal responses of this patient, you can see that they're not as pleasant as what you would normally see when you walk into a patient that has normal cognition, and in those types of or in those types of interaction pieces. This particular patient has, I believe, dementia, and he's been brought in to a long-term care facility. So as the students are navigating the safety issues, then he starts to talk to them, and he asks the questions of, who are you? What do you want? Where am I? But his voice quality is, you can tell he's confused. He's scared. He wants to know what's going on. He needs to be reoriented. So this is a great one to kind of get them into that process of talking with a patient that may not be, they're not the pleasant one. They're not the easy patient.
And this is an open RN scenario. So this is an open education resource. This scene template is available for use. So we've got that in the commons, and we've just continued to upgrade and refine it with feedback like this. We've gotten a lot of great input in terms of how we can continue improving it.
And again, it's easy to navigate with the controls and everything. You're not having to worry about navigating through a large scene like the mass casualty scene. This one is much smaller. So there's not as much, you don't have to manipulate the controls as much. And it's a good scene to learn how to use the VR system. And it gives them the rationale as well as to why that is a safety issue. So that's come in handy when we're talking about environmental assessment, safety hazards, and things like that. He just kind of sits there and hangs out.
In some cases, you could have somebody logged in playing the role of the patient where they're yelling at you the whole time. Like, what are you doing? That's my stuff. Get out of here. And that really helps bring them to life. In addition to those,
we've done that too. The hard part is I can't control the scene because I have a female voice and we need a male voice. So we tend to use the preset responses. But if we could get, we have a couple of faculty members who could do this with us. And so we're going to start bringing them in so they can be the voice of the patient. We could run 2 rooms simultaneously. So and as you said, they're asynchronous. So we had a group of students in commons in the headsets in the environment, and then the other group of students in the mass casualty environment at the same time. Did not have a problem with the system running.
At all.
Nope. The other neat part to this is we only have 1 room that's assigned to us at this point. It would be nice to have 2. And so then you can have 2 separate groups running at the same time. So you could put a set of, let's say, our associate degree nurses in 1 room and maybe our LVN students in another, and we have the 2 labs that are separated. So we potentially could run 2 rooms at once. And then if you throw the commons room in, you could potentially run 3 rooms at once. So this system, if you had multi rooms available to you, the possibilities and the teaching pieces to this are endless. The only thing you're limited by is how many headsets you have, how many stations you have, and how many faculty that you can get to come and kind of run herd on everyone. We did a lot of research. I know you're showing the pictures. We did a lot of research on the equipment. You have to have the right equipment pieces. And so what I did with that piece of it is we consulted with our IT group and made sure that we got things that were going to be compatible with our computer systems at the college. But the other thing we looked at, I know you're kind of zooming in on the headset and the handheld pieces, is we looked at which VR system we wanted to use. And it was a toss up between the HP Reverb, is what you're seeing there in the picture, versus the Oculus headsets. I think those are wireless headsets. Or the Oculus sets. These the HP Reverbs are not. The nice part about the Reverb headsets is they have more adjustment to them. You can fine tune the lenses and the distances and things like that a little easier on those headsets. The hand controls with this particular group, they're just really easy to navigate with the students and with the faculty. And they're easy to learn. If you can use 1 hand or both hands. You don't have to have both. The big challenge we found was trying to get the systems to talk to each other. So Amarillo College system talking to the mixed reality system of Windows versus, and then getting it attached to or connected to the Acadicus system so that we could run everything. But that's why you have a good team. You get the right people in place, find those people that can do that for you. And once things got set, it's been good.
Excellent. In the arrangement that you have here, a lot of schools struggle with like, where are we going to set this up? And when I saw this image, I thought it was brilliant the way you're using your existing physical sim lab, but you're adding the virtual component to it. So you can sort of do either or. You can have some activities with the physical mannequin, and then maybe we'll step into VR if we want to go to an environment we don't have, like you go to a NICU or a PICU, or transport yourself to different environments using the virtual reality.
Our college, we're so blessed to have the space that we have. There's a lot of colleges that don't have the square footage that we have up in our NRC. This is not a typical lab. So we were able to set up 16 stations, 8 in one lab, 8 in another. And the image that you have up, essentially, if you mirrored that in the other room, they look exactly the same. So yeah, we are extremely blessed to have the equipment, and the space.
We have 4 labs like this.
4 labs
all together. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And you had mentioned at one point that the monitors or the PC can also be used as a monitor for the physical mannequin patient. Is that true, or is that was I understanding that correctly?
Yes. So what the goal after we complete the grant cycle is to take those computer stations that you see next to the beds and start incorporating those into patient scenarios. So if we've got our intro or foundation students that are coming in and they're just learning how to do the very basic skills, what we do is we set their mannequin up, and then we can use the computer as their charting system. So we can run them through a scenario if we have to, using either VR or non-VR. They can watch the non-VR video recording. By the way, you can record, but you can use the recording of that particular piece. They can watch it at the bedside, and then they can switch to the chart, and then they can start taking care of the patient in the bed. So it's almost like having a study system that you can look at, study, and then immediately apply that information to that patient. And the nice part about Acadicus with your program and with the program that your team has put together, John, is that you can make it fit your needs. So if we wanted to, as we just described, if we wanted to later on bring in a more realistic event for the students, we can do that, and they can study first in VR or non-VR, and then transition over to practice. But it makes it more real for them as well. And that's one of the things that simulation and the VR systems have allowed us to do, is to make these events more real to students, so they transfer to practice a lot easier.
You're also building additional content going forward. Could you talk a little bit about what else is coming, what's coming in the future, and what we're developing now? Do you mind if I show the design doc for the donning and doffing?
Ahead. No, go ahead.
Just pull that.
I'm waiting for this one. I'm ready for this one, because my students are in the process of learning about infection and infection control, and especially enhanced isolation precautions and things like that have really come to the forefront with the pandemic issues. So this particular scenario targets our foundation students. These are the first semester students that come in that have just been accepted into the nursing programs. And one of their big focuses and content areas in this particular class is infection control and the different types of isolation, and how to put on and take off the PPE properly. And so I took some of the objectives that we had used in the past for this course and sent them to you guys, and then kind of went through an idea where that the students could stand outside of a patient room, like a virtual patient room, and put their PPE on in the correct order, and put the correct PPE on for the specific isolation room that they were going into. Because if you look at this document, there are 4 different isolation types that we run into. there, yeah, right there at the top, that we run into, and especially in the hospitals. Well, our newer students have not been introduced to this. So the goal for this one is to help them walk through that entire process. Starting outside, we put all of our PPE on, depending on what isolation room that we're going into. You can walk into the patient room, interact with that patient, and then before you leave the room, what is the process of taking all of that off safely so that they're not spreading infection around the rooms or around the hospitals, or contracting infections. And this particular scenario is also important for our COVID um, units and things like that, because the way that it looks for us, and as far as future view for medicine, is that COVID's not going to go completely away. So we're going to have to figure out how to decrease the spread of that between our patients and keeping our healthcare workers healthy so they can go take care of people. But this is a little bit more simplistic, um, I guess, a simplistic design versus the safety room versus the mass casualty event, but it's one that can be used over and over and over in any of the levels. So like Debbie's mass casualty is very specific to her class, her content. This one can transfer between the classes. Um, which is really nice. That's going to be another good multi-use room for us. And then futuristically, what I would like to see us do is add things like a maternity room to have an actual birth. Um, my pediatric crew up here, they need some more VR scenarios, so we're looking at sending you another pediatric scenario that is it's not an asthma, a traditional asthma patient. It's one that's going to be outside the hospital. So it's going to be more similar to the mass casualty, but I think we may actually use the soccer field scene for this one, because there's more to nursing than just the hospitals. There's all this community health that we're learning about, so we need to get those students into those environments as well. I'm hoping to build some more community health scenes.
Excellent. Yeah, there's we have a birthing simulator is in development that will be coming in June, July kind of framework time frame. So we're looking forward to that. So any cases or scenarios around that would be fantastic for sure. And we have a social determinants of health. There's a curbside community, and Chamberlain University has been sponsoring more and more content there. So there's going to be a lot of that coming. So there's going to be a ton of content to work with, and then we can work together to determine, what else do we need? What would you like to add? How can we customize it for your program, and go forward with that? So that's very exciting.
I would eventually like to move our VR systems into a separate lab at some point, so that we can spread them out a little bit more, and give the students a little more freedom to kind of move around. But again, that's going to be down the road, and as we're updating the technology and those kinds of things.
I'm just curious, what do you see as the future of virtual simulation? Like, what's the ultimate potential of virtual simulation?
Oh, I'm going for the holodeck on the Starship Enterprise.
That's it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I really believe that that is a future for us. I mean, I call the Arch. Yes, I noticed that on y'all's name, Arch. So to me, I think that in the headset and the real piece of it, and that it's not perfect yet, but it's way better than it was just a few years ago. And as fast as our technology is advancing and those kind of things, I'm not going to be surprised if the headsets are going to get a lot smaller. And then the next thing you know, we are going to have holograms that are going to be there in those type of scenarios for us. So I really feel that's coming on, and I am a geek. I confess I'm a geek, but I do see technology as a good basis for practice of anything. The paramedics would be great with our disaster sim. And I was going to invite Wade this next time and see if he wants to come. But there's other professions that deal with people that those kind of scenarios, whether not even healthcare, just getting in there and doing things is a good practice for them.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, even engineers that are building things can use those virtual scenarios. Right now they have, what is it that they have? AutoCAD. They make
Oh
a
yeah.
3D and everything like that. I see that going that way too for this kind of immersion of technology and being able to see it. So
And there is a system, there are several systems out like that now that allow us to do that, where you can create, instead of having a 3D environment, is true 4D, and adding that tactile piece to it. I mean, we've seen our mechanics that have the headsets that look just like my eyeglasses, and you get that image or whatever you're working on, you get a holographic type image projected onto that, so that as you're pulling apart an engine, or as you're pulling apart a body, that's a terrible picture, but think about doing a virtual autopsy. As you got a picture of that patient, you've got a scan of that patient, you can take it, physically look at it, but not necessarily pull everything out. Physically, you can pull it out virtually and start to look at different parts and pieces. And that sounds real sci-fi, but it's there, and it's
there.
coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've
would,
seen the projected body parts. They
Mhm.
have those 3D holographic hearts that can just pop right down
Yep.
there in front of you in the classroom.
Yep.
They're already headed that way.
And they're doing heart caths and all of these invasive procedures in places like Norway and Sweden, where they have those systems, and the physician can put this eye set on. He can see the image of the patient, he can see the x-rays, he can see where that catheter is being fed into, and all at the same time looking down and still taking care of a patient. So if you can wrap your mind around that type of technology, that's not here as much as it is overseas, but we are getting there. And Debbie was talking about the holodeck. They've got immersive classrooms now that we can literally change the walls of the classroom to fit the environment that we need. And so it's still a basic projector system. It's quite expensive, but if you can afford to put them in, they truly are amazing. In fact, I have talked to a company overseas in England that have they build it in pods, and they literally deliver your pod to you, and then you build your classroom around that. So I could see us doing that. I want to convert some of these rooms.
Yeah, but and you think about it too, when I first started looking at the 3D projections, or 4D as you call them, in the room, and the headsets and all that kind of stuff, there was always worry of seizure, or people were going to get nauseated, or they were going to, and somehow or another the technology has gotten past that, and people are using, like our headsets. We didn't have anybody have an issue. So I think, yes, I think things are getting more techie all the time.
Getting techie. But at the same time, this system allows us to remember we're taking care of a human too. And we have to, that's what we have to do as educators, just kind of bring that piece into it, so that we don't forget the humanity and we don't get so tied up in the technology.